Welcome to the Spiritual Chats podcast. I'm your host, Reed, also known as Emerald Lotus. Each week, I sit down with a unique guest to discuss various aspects of spirituality. Each guest is a master in their specific niche. Not only will they share their wisdom with us, but we'll also get a chance to know some of our favorite creators a little bit better. Today, I'm very excited to sit down with the Pythian Priestess, also known as Ashley. Ashley is incredibly skilled and knowledgeable in her craft. She is a spiritual advisor, professional tarot reader, initiated priestess, ritual leader, and occult educator. She's connected to Western Hermeticism, ceremonial magic, and witchcraft, making her the perfect guest for spooky season. Welcome, Ashley. I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you today.
Hi, Reed. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
One thing that I really love about your content is that you share a lot about your own personal witchcraft practice. I saw you recently reciting some ancient Egyptian spell work on TikTok Live, and you were going over the lines again and again to really practice and familiarize yourself with the ritual. And I love that you share your personal practice that is so often hidden by practitioners. And I know that some people may come across someone reciting an ancient spell on TikTok and assume it's like a bunch of, as people like to put it, like woo-woo. And I'd love to get started by asking you, how do you feel about people who deny magic and who consider it woo-woo?
I feel bad for those people. I can't imagine living a life of materialism. That's something I fought with a lot when I was younger, when I was deciding whether or not I was an atheist. And I ultimately knew I wasn't. I was going to be an agnostic. But even then, you take out the wonder of life. A lot of occultism is trying to regain the childlike wonder of the universe. And for those people who call it woo-woo, they really don't understand that occult sciences are a science. That, in fact, famous philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they were also trained and initiated into ancient occult practices.
That was so well put. And actually, when you talked about bringing back the childlike wonder, I got goosebumps because I completely resonate with that. And I totally get what you mean. Having a magical practice and really resonating and believing in it is like the most important thing in, I think, many of our lives. It adds so much. I don't know what I would do on a day-to-day without having that whimsy and that magic in my life. It is so important. And so when we talk about like magic or witchcraft, what is magic? Can you give us your understanding of what is magic?
Absolutely. So I'm going to paraphrase the late Donald Michael Craig. Magic is the raising of energy, the direction of energy, and the will to move energy. Ultimately, what magic is you are taking energy, force, chi, ki, however you would like to call it, and you're pushing it towards a change in the universe that you are directing.
Interesting. So it's giving me the magician tarot card energy, like we're kind of picking up on what is already existing, but also putting our own influence into it and channeling something to kind of bring it to fruition.
Absolutely. I mean, the great thing that you brought up in the magician card is the master manifester, the creator of reality. Now, it may not be very easy to do, and it also has a lot of responsibility. That's the one thing that I see a lot in the modern age is people have a tendency to use spirit like an ATM rather than the deep metaphysical practices and connection to the divine.
I totally get that. And I think that I am someone who recently I've been really reflecting on the fact that I think personally I do use spirit as an ATM. And I think that I am always, I feel like I take a lot in magic rather than giving a lot back. I feel like I'm always asking for something, I'm like, what's going to come next? When is money coming? When is this coming? I'm trying to take a lot. And I feel like that's something I've been trying to work on a lot, is trying to give more back in my magical practice.
That's wonderful. That self-awareness is so important. And a big part of that, I think, especially in American culture, is that there isn't necessarily a relationship that is created between the deity and the practitioner. And not everyone is meant to be a priestess, and not everyone should be a priestess, but there should always be a communication and a reverence, a respect. Again, we're not treating it like an ATM, but the provider, the creator of our universe, and that does deserve love and respect.
For sure, that makes so much sense. And so, why do you think that magic is important? Why do you think that more people should maybe explore it or have more respect for it?
Magic is really all there is. So, if we think about quantum physics and we think about all of these atoms and quarks bouncing around off of each other, creating material, well, that's great. It's very cool. But eventually, what happens when you die? And I think a lot of people, especially in our culture, are afraid of that question. And there's a lot of life's existential questions that can actually be cured, or at least dumbed, right? Like we have that inherent anxiety or existential dread in our lives, and it can be taken away if you practice magic, love. And that's when you're getting in a really, really deep level. When we're getting past just the, I use this crystal to help my anxiety. We're getting down to the nuts and bolts. And because religion is no longer let's be honest, it's no longer a pillar in our society, people need guidance. People actually crave, if you look at human history, they crave the supernatural. And yes, so science is so important. And I think that magic and science can coexist because they are focusing on the same goal, which is to explain the nature of the universe. Science explains it through data and numbers, and magic and mysticism explains it through metaphor, symbols, and storytelling. And so if someone has both sides of the coin, both the scientific knowledge and the magical knowledge, I genuinely believe that really completes you as a person and gives you all of the tools that you need to live a self-actualized life.
That was so well said. I absolutely love what you said, and I think it's so true about the importance of magic and science being able to coexist, and not even being able to, but needing to coexist in order to have a really fulfilled and balanced life. And one thing that I have to ask you about is because I know there are so many people listening who either are practitioners or who are interested in becoming witches or practicing or really, really deepening their magic. Do you have any tips for someone who is starting out on their witchcraft journey? Because I know there's a lot of fear-based misconceptions about magic and practicing magic. And what do you have to say about that? Was that ever something that stopped you?
My first thing is be aware of cults. There are a lot of cults out here, and now they're online, which becomes such a big problem. So I would say that the first thing is people really want magic to be this community-based thing. It's not. You may have a group of people who also practice, but remember, magic, the system of magic you are practicing is perfect. Humans are not. And I've seen more than once people get burned by a group and they give up on it completely. Magic is a solitary path. It is one that is often walked alone. If you're not comfortable with that, let's explore that. Why are you afraid of being alone? Because when you do magic, you're truly not alone. You're communing with the higher or, lower, depending on what you're doing, levels of entities, and even within yourself. So don't be afraid of not having a group. And just a few warning signs of cults. The first thing is that the leader should never be infallible. He, she, they are a person. They are not God. If they are treated like God, run. The second thing is any kind of exploitation, whether financially, if you're paying thousands of dollars like Scientology, get out. If you're asked to perform sexual favors, get out. If you are being sleep deprived, withheld food, get out. And the other thing I would say is that I was in a cult, It happens. Even smart people fall into this. It doesn't make you stupid. It just makes you wiser.
Wow, that is so well said. And it's so true because it's just so easy for people to take advantage of someone on their spiritual journey because we're all looking for answers. Like we all, and especially with magic, something that is so broad, there's so many different elements and ways to practice, and there's so much fear mongering, and because there are things to fear, right? Like there are things that can go wrong within our magic or things that we're ignoring within ourselves, whatever it may be, spiritual psychosis, like there's a lot. And so we look to these people, and I know as myself personally, like the people that really opened me up on my spiritual journey, the people who are like healers and teachers, I have so much respect for those people. Like I would follow them very far. Like I trust them a lot, and I think of myself as a very smart person. I also have a very rebellious nature, but I see these people in a way that I don't see other people, if that makes sense, even though I know that I should. But it's hard because you hold them on such a pedestal just naturally.
Well, let me tell you what's happening there. So that is a psychological phenomenon called transference. And that is where you are transferring either divinity, an authority figure, the relationship with your mother and father onto another person. This happens a lot. And it's okay, but ultimately, divinity should be reserved for the divine and for also within yourself once you get to that level. Just a thought.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that's so important because, I mean, I absolutely I have succumbed to that 100%. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about the cult that you were in? That might be a little personal, but I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. I can tell you a little bit about it. So first of all, I wasn't like on a compound. It wasn't anything like that. It was actually within a college. And we've seen this pop up a couple of times in the last 10 years where there is a cult created within a school system. And that I put very heavily on the school's fault. Whenever you have someone who has grandiose ideals of themselves, a heavy dose of narcissism, there's a tendency to start creating a cult-like dynamic. And so this professor took advantage of women, and I was one of them. And he did not like men. It was actually very well known that he didn't like men. He had slept with multiple girls throughout his entire tenure that he was there. And he created this cult-like following of women around him. So while it was not a cult like we may think of like the Manson family or Wild Wild Country, it still follows those exact tenets. There was an exploitation. There was a misuse of power. There was an infallibility to the teacher, and that power really should have been checked. And it's too bad that the institution didn't and wasn't able to recognize that. And a lot of grooming. So cults can come from all sides, right? There can be a cult within politics, a cult within a university, a cult within religion. It's not just confined to magic.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. And I think that is something really important to keep in mind because you're right. When we think about cults, a lot of the time we are thinking about, the Charles Mansons or the very like outrageous or like obvious types of cults. But yeah, they can absolutely happen within smaller systems and in different systems. So I really appreciate you shedding light on that because as seekers and people that are wanting to learn more, it is hard. It's hard to know who to put your trust into when exploring this because it is such a delicate topic and it is scary for a lot of people. And can we talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions about magic and kind of why there is this fear around it and, what can we do to kind of take away some of those misconceptions?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have some that you want to go over?
Ooh, okay. Let's think here. Well, first of all, I know that a lot of people think that like using any divinatory system automatically makes you a witch. And I feel like there's especially lately, this is maybe another kind of misconception, is like it seems like everyone is a witch. Everyone thinks they're a witch. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so, right. Divination is a very sacred practice, and it's not as easy as just pulling out the cards, shuffling them. There's work that needs to go into this. So, if you are a witch, you're going to be thinking about the energies around that. So, For example, let's say you come home from work and you just spent a whole day talking to people. Your aura or your bioenergetic field has absorbed other people's energies, thus meaning it would be very difficult, if not near impossible, to receive a clear reading. A witch, she's going to cleanse herself. She's going to cleanse her aura. She's going to cleanse the space in which she is going to be using. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. There's not like one particular way. You can use smoke, you can use water, you can use words like I do, vibration specifically. And then there's going to be the prayer over the cards as well. Most of the time when I am doing tarot, there's a prayer that goes on beforehand that I am doing. Like, I think, witches, we're powering and channeling. Now, I'm using channel very loosely here. I don't mean I'm pulling an energy or an entity through and into my body. I'm moving the energy. Let's use that word. I'm moving the energy into the cards, blessing them with divine words in order to create a divination. The other thing I think witches usually do is they cast a circle. A circle is a term for a form of protection that comes from Wicca, which comes from Golden Dawn, etc. The point is that you're protecting yourselves from outside influences. So it's not as simple as just picking up a pendulum and holding it and seeing what happens. Like, there are levels, there are steps here to manipulate and control and direct the energy around you.
Very well said. And I think with the rise of divination systems, that's something that a lot of people don't understand or don't care to learn. So I appreciate you going in on that. Another topic that, I think another misconception rather, is that all witches worship the devil.
No. Oh, Lord. It's so interesting. The devil is a knockoff or caricature of Pan. Pan is a nature god who looks like a satyr. He has hooves. He has horns on his head. And Christianity, if you really look through the Bible and you search really hard, you're not going to find a lot of passages specifically talking about the devil. You will find passages referring to Shaitan or Satan, which represents adversary, but that's a title that's actually given. So anyone can be a Shaitan. That's just your adversary. Now, is there a larger malefic force in the universe? Yes. However, let's get away from our Christian paradigm for a second, where there's good versus evil. I want us to go and think about the Eastern paradigm, particularly Taoism. You may be familiar with Taoism more than you think you are, particularly if you recognize the yin and the yang symbol, the black and the white circle that shows the intertwining of energies. In my estimation and my understanding of the universe, which I have about 400 books to prove that I've spent a lot of time studying this. I have a degree in philosophy and theology. The universe, without the balance of white and black, is not. There is a need to have a shadow. And ultimately, and most importantly, that is a reflection of your mind. It always, always, always comes back to you. We have levels to our mind. We have our unconscious mind, our dark mind. We have our conscious mind, our light mind. And magic, in so many ways, is a representation of our human psychology. Aleister Crowley talks about this too with the 72 Goetia. In the opening introduction, when he published the book in the 1900s, he says that every demon in this book is a representation of a part of your brain. So when we think about this, what do demons represent? They represent greed. They represent lust. They represent the 7 deadly sins. We're not going to get into the whole Goetia thing. We can, if you want to talk to me about that, you can hit me up on Instagram. But demons are not simply just evil. But the idea that witches worship the devil really does go back to Pan. And that was a nature god. Pan has something called the panpipes, which are 7 lutes that he plays. There's like, you can find lots of pictures of it online, which represent the 7 planets. Like, there's nothing here where it's like baby sacrifice, blood, etc. And even the Satanists that I do know, who are theistic Satanists, who do worship Satan, it's not like you think it is most of the time. It's very hard to find like that evil satanic group that you see on the news. And honestly, most of those people really aren't in the scene anyways. Like, they're doing their own very strange, and as you said before, maybe even there's some psychosis involved in there. But the majority of witches do not worship the devil unless someone very specifically tells you, I am a theistic Satanist.
That was so well said and so true, yes. Ask, do not assume. Another misconception is the one that you have to be born a witch. What do you think about people that maybe don't have any like magical lineage as far as they know, or ancestral ties to magic?
So this is what I do know. Intuition and magical abilities, right? Everyone, like, it's just like talent. Some people are born with talent, some people aren't. Runs in the maternal side, as far as I can tell. Just because you weren't born with talent doesn't mean you can't do it. In fact, determination and consistency will override any kind of person with natural talent who may not practice consistently. The idea of hereditary witches, I guess, is cool. But it's like, so what? So your mom and your grandma did. That's great. What are you doing? Like, show me your report card. I think a lot of people say that stuff in order to try to differentiate themselves and make themselves seem special and alluring. Ultimately, I don't care. Like, all right, great. So you come from a line of witches. What's your power? How do you do the work?
I love that. And that is just so true. I love what you said about consistency overriding the born talent, because it's so true. You could have a parent that's an Olympian, but you've never worked out a day in your life. Like, it doesn't necessarily transfer.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, that is not your award or your like pride to hold. It's just very superficial.
For sure. I love that. And I feel like that opens the door to so many more people, because there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who don't have family members that were, clear practitioners or that devoted their lives to healing in certain ways.
I don't have family members who do this. Are you kidding? My family hates that I do this. They think that it's so weird. And they think, they've asked me if I'm going to hell. They've asked me if I've worshiped the devil. And I am very happy with my progression. And again, that goes back to community, Reed. This is a path that's walked alone. You do not need a community. You may want one, but you don't need one.
For sure. I completely resonate with that. Absolutely. Now, because it is October, spooky season, I feel like we get a lot about like occult coming up around this time. And one misconception that I see a lot is that like all occult practices are very dangerous.
Well, they are. So, and the reason for that is, so occult practices, usually they've been hidden because can I swear?
Yes, you can.
Because they fuck with your mind. That's what they're supposed to do. Occult stuff, now let's think of it in a lot of different ways. Let's talk about Cornelius Agrippa. So he was writing in I think it was the 16th century, the 1500s. And if you go look at some of those sigils that he writes and you look at them long enough, yeah, it's going to scramble your brain a little bit, because it's supposed to. So when we practice anything occult, it all goes back to making sure you have your bearings and your groundedness. This is a very touchy subject, but you have to be so careful if you're practicing magic, if you have mental illness, because it does unground you and it can push you into, especially if you don't have a proper teacher, you can be making up assumptions and associations that don't actually exist, because occultism, at highest levels, yes, you are working with energies outside of yourself, But the majority of the time, it's about bringing energies into you and shifting your mindset, which is dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. And calling in energies just generally, I mean, we never really know what we're going to get. It's like a Russian roulette, right? Like we don't really know what we're playing with, especially when we're not practiced or taught, especially with like setting proper intention and protections.
Yeah, so here's an example. People will always ask me, they're like, oh, can you evoke a spirit? Can I see a spirit in your like bedroom in real life? Yeah, but I'm not going to do that for you. That takes like 6 months of preparation. Like, that's a lot of work. But what's actually more important is invocation. So invocation is when you bring a spirit into your body. Now, this is, again, not like possession. It's not exactly like channeling. When I work with my goddess, Isis, and I invoke her, like, the energy is blue. It's very light blue. You've probably seen me wear my ritual regalia on TikTok. And that energy actually begins to resonate with me, and I become a little different. My personality is a little different. Definitely more nurturing, sweeter, kinder. I in a good way, I become very motherly. That is not who I am naturally. My natural disposition is actually very Saturnian. Most of my chart is Aquarius, very cold kind of person. Now, if I invoke Hecate, which I do, I'm not dedicated to Hecate, but she and I have a very good relationship. It's a very different kind of energy. She's much harsher, which is more like my natural personality. But you do see like a more of an edge. These are not to be played with. And these are sacred and ancient energies that do affect you in your daily life.
For sure. That's a very good thing for people to keep in mind when they are invoking energies or working with different energies. And for listeners who are curious to explore some rituals this autumn, do you have any tips for someone who is maybe starting on their witchcraft journey or wanting to do some different rituals that are kind of easier for people? Like, are there any spells or practices that they should explore or anything that they should avoid?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is I do offer ritual guides. They are between 12 and 20 pages. They're on my website, pythianmysteryschool.com/shop. When you were in October, particularly, the veil is quite thin, which gives you the opportunity to communicate with the other side more easily. So if you wanted to talk to a past loved one, that would be a good thing to do at this time. Safely, of course. There's lots of procedures that need to be done to ensure that. This is also a great time for self-reflection. As we're going into the darker part of the year, breaking bad habits is something that I'd recommend at this time. The other thing I would say is don't be worried about making it aesthetic. I've done very powerful rituals with a tea light candle and some incense. You do not need to have like every bell and whistle to make your spell effective. It can be very bare bones. It's what you're bringing into it. Now, don't get me wrong. You should absolutely have an offering for the energies that you're working with. But even if it's something as simple as incense, an apple, an egg, it goes a long way. It doesn't have to be this intense and glamorized version of witchcraft that you see so much on Instagram.
That's something so important to remember. It's so true. Some of my best spells have been like, there's no way I would have wanted to film myself and show what I looked like because I looked a mess, my altar looked a mess, and they were the most potent. It's really not about the aesthetics, although it can, of course, inspire you to connect, just like you were talking about, wearing the garbs and how that can really like help you to invoke energy. There's something to be said for it, but it's not necessarily like the be all end all most important thing. One thing I'm curious about you is how did you get your title of being a priestess, if I'm allowed to ask this? I feel like that is such an impressive title.
Oh, thank you. So let's go back to 1996. I was 4 years old. As I said, my family is not into this. They're Roman Catholic. And when I was very young, my babysitters were two Benedictine nuns. They're my great aunts. They were my great aunts. And I was playing with my cousins. And I don't know why they did this, but they pulled us aside and they asked me if I wanted to get married to Jesus. And I was like, no, I'd rather be a priest, because I knew that priests like could touch God, because I knew that when they held up the Eucharist, it was like a really big deal. And they said, "Oh, sweetie, you're a girl, you can't do that." And my little 4-year-old brain was like, okay, well, I don't care about this anymore. So I had always had this inclination towards the priest craft. And it wasn't until 2019. This is just a trigger warning for some people. This is a kind of dark subject. Priestesshood is something that you earn. It's a title that you have to earn. Now, that being said, I didn't know that I was going to be earning this title. I just knew that I had to be of service at the time. So my college roommate, her brother suffered from schizophrenia, and he was also dabbling in the occult. Unfortunately, he took his own life in October of 2019. And she called me while I was working for MTV. She said, "Hey, I'm not going to go into the details, but he died." And I said, "Okay, I'll be there." I don't know why I said that. I just decided in that exact moment I had to be with her. So I turned to my boss. I said, "Hey, I need to take 3 days off, take the weekend." I booked a flight to Florida, and I went back. And for those 3 days, I did nothing but serve that family. I set up the memorial. I made the food. I helped them make like an altar, and just was there in a place of service. The other thing that happened was, because he was in the occult, he had this very large, and I mean large, this is like a 5-foot by 5-foot mirror, huge mirror. And it had some stuff written on the back, and I was like, uh-oh, this is enchanted. This is a problem. The family kept seeing an apparition of the sun appearing in the room. And I was like, okay, this is either a psychological issue or he's using this mirror as a portal in between worlds. And I was like, you can't do that, dude. You chose to leave. You got to stay gone. And so I disenchanted the mirror with the tools that I had at the time, which was very limited, and broke the mirror and went on my merry way. 6 months later, right before COVID, actually, I was working and going to a class on ceremonial magic. And the teacher, who was my mentor at the time, was like, "Hey, there's a temple dedicated to Isis." And I was like, "There's a what?" "Yeah, I know that lady. She's really important to me. I need to go see what this is." And so I had to go through a pretty rigorous interview. It was, you had to go through 3 rigorous interviews. You had to get psychologically evaluated. And I was accepted. And during the initiation practice, in which I cannot tell you much, at the end of it, when they give you like your name, I was given a title, which was priestess. And I was like, yes, I knew it. And I'm like, my childhood dreams had been fulfilled.
Wow, that is incredible. That is truly like an insane story. I'm so grateful that you shared that with us. It's really, really cool. And I know that you've taught, like you've given so many resources. You're really an amazing teacher. What prompted you to start teaching others and posting online rather than kind of keeping your magic a secret?
So it started when, TikTok was an accident. I was working for MTV, and one of the my supervisor was like, "Hey, did you know there's a bunch of witches on TikTok?" I was like, "The dancing app? What?" And she's like, "Yeah, you should take a look at that." And so I did. I posted some stuff, and it popped off. It was really simple stuff. My very beginning videos were this is a tarot spread, and I earned 10,000 followers within 2 weeks. And I was like, wow, this is it. This had been a secret for me for so long. I mean, my family doesn't like it. And being able, girl, I have been collecting these books I'm 32 now. I've been collecting them since I was 14 years old. I have hundreds of books on this, and I was like, this is it. This is my time to actually share the thing that I care about most and not be labeled as psychotic or weird, but praised. And that was so exciting because I love this. This is my whole life. Like, people have hobbies, and my hobby is magic. It is also going to therapy. But, my goal in life is always to focus on self-individuation, enlightenment. And now there's this opportunity in the world where I get to lead others towards that same goal. And that is such a blessing.
That is so beautiful. And it really also speaks to how you said you were a very Saturn-ruled person. I feel like that is just so true in the way that you come across. You feel so knowledgeable. And although you said you have a lot of Aquarius, you do feel very grounded. Like, you're a very trusting person. I feel like I always learn new things from you, and I'm very inspired by what you post. I love how vulnerable and open you are about your magic. I feel like that's something that I don't see very often at all.
No, thank you. Yeah, like, I'm not trying to be better than anybody else. That's not the goal here. It's to show the genuine nature of what it means to be a practitioner and break down some of those boundaries like we've talked about today. No, you don't have to be a hereditary witch. No, you don't have to have the most beautiful outcome, the most beautiful ritual. Like, magic is for everyone, and anyone can access it because it lives within you.
Beautiful. So well said. Now let's get to the Q&Q segment, the question after question, where we ask multiple questions to find out more about our magical guest. So let's get into it. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay, what are your thoughts on Ouija boards? Do or don't?
Do, but you need to know how to do it correctly. Most people don't.
Fair enough. Do you want to go a little bit more into this and give some warnings for this spooky season to anyone that wants to pick one up?
Ooh, so this spooky season, you can watch Sam and Colby on Halloween. Their episode is going to come out where I do use the spirit board correctly. That is the proper terminology. If you are interested in learning how to use the spirit board correctly, you can contact me at Pythian Mystery School, or you can find the book. Now, the book is going to be more expensive than the class. It's called Aleister Crowley and the Ouija Board. By the way, you can't just use a store-made one. You need to make your own, and that is time-consuming.
Okay, very, very helpful. Thank you. Now, let's say you could only use 3 tools for a spell for abundance. What are you grabbing?
Cinnamon incense and bay leaves and a yellow candle. If yellow is not available, a white one.
Nice. And I feel like most people have that in their house right now. What is a symbol, number, or color that you've been seeing a lot lately? A symbol that's being shown to you a lot lately?
Spiders. A lot of spiders. I don't know 100% what they mean, but I know that they're there.
Interesting. I feel like spiders for me always symbolize slow progress to the bigger picture. It's like the web weaving, right? Like slowly working at something to build something greater.
I love that.
What is your favorite tarot deck? Do you have a favorite?
No, I'm basic. I love the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I think it's easier to describe, especially when you're reading for somebody else. I can flip over the cards. And Pamela Coleman Smith created those cards to actually put you in a trance. The colors, the symbolism, and it's very easy for your intuition to pick up on things, especially if you're not versed in tarot.
A classic but a goodie. I like it. If someone wants to explore magic or witchcraft further, because we know you love your books, are there any recommended readings that you think that like every single practitioner should read?
Okay, so we're going to go from like fun to crunchy. So the fun book, I'd recommend The Everyday Witch by Deborah Blake. She's a wonderful author, and that book in particular is also a grimoire. It's a journal, so that's like a wonderful beginner's book. Now, if we're going to get into something a little more crunchy, the one that I really recommend is called The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This is not a practitioner's book necessarily, but it is a wonderful reference book, and it's also super easy to read because it teaches you basically how the universe works. You want to understand why the planets work the way they do? Manly P. Hall will explain it. Those, I would say, are like my two go-tos. And for a fun bonus one, I really do recommend reading it. It's called Ego and Archetype. And let me get the name of this person right here. Edward F. E. Dinger. It's Edinger. And this book is ultimately about the psychological wholeness, and I've said this word a lot, the process of individuation through the discovery of God or goddess.
Ooh, amazing. I'm going to definitely check out that last one. And I definitely will give a second mention about The Secret Teachings of All Ages. That book is amazing. I love to even just open it and like flip to a random page. And I find that the things that I learn in that book are always then reflected to me after. It feels like such a magical book. I love it. I love that recommendation. I don't see people talking about that book enough.
I agree. Manly P. Hall is the unsung hero of American mysticism.
Ooh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your wisdom and your vulnerability about not only your practice, but about your life as well. And I think that you've hopefully enabled so many of us to feel more confident to share how we practice our magic instead of keeping it so much in the shadows. So where can our audience find you online? And is there anything you'd like to plug about your offerings?
Well, thank you so much, Reed, for having me here. So you can find me online pretty much anywhere under Pythian Priestess. That's Pythian Priestess, Priestess. And if you're interested in learning under me, I'm actually in the process of revamping my school. This is coming out in October, so it should already be out and available. I have classes ranging from spell work to psychic surgery, learning to read tarot intuitively, developing your intuition. And what I offer people who are interested in working with me is a 30-minute free consultation where you and I sit down together and we map out your spiritual journey and what I can do to help you achieve the goals that you're seeking. In order to sign up for that, all you need to do is go to pythianmysteryschool.com, and on page 1 you'll be able to sign up for that time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. Every day is such a blessing to wake up and be able to talk about this.
I love that. If you want to find any products or links from this episode, you can find out more on my new Instagram account, Spiritual Chats Pod. I'm your host, Emerald Lotus, and I'm so excited to kick off spooky season with you. I will see you next week. Bye.